जयति जयति भारत माता बुध गीता 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 निखिल मत वन निरतनत जन सुगीता निखिल मत वन निरतनत जन सुगीता निखिल मत वन निरतनत जन सुगीता जयति जयति जयति।
नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं दैवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये. I place my humble salutation at the lotus feet of Saint Vedavyasa, who has enabled us today to look and delve into the Bhagavad Gita. Today is a special episode based on the continuation of the previous, where we had observed a word called Atatayinaha. Arjuna calls the Kauravas as Atatayinaha. So today's episode is elaboration of the word Atatayinaha. What is Atatayinaha? What do our Shastras say? And what is the punishment for it? So, we all are familiar with the term capital punishment, or in common terms it is called death penalty. It is often very debated by human rights councils and other people as to whether death penalty is justified or not, or whom to grant death penalty. Our Indian Penal Code IPC is predominantly based on this distribution. For which person what kind of punishment should be granted, who deserves what kind of punishment. Let us see what the Vedas have to say about this. Before going into that, we must understand what Veda and Smriti are. Veda means with, which is something which should be known to everyone. Yat with, tat Vedaha. The one which should be known to everyone is called a Veda. Our Vedas are predominantly not religion or God specific. It is lifestyle specific. It is an arsenal of good lifestyle practices and precautions, which today we have branded as tradition. It is actually, rather than tradition, it is a set of good lifestyle values for a healthy lifestyle. Starting from the point where we place neem and mango leaves at the entrance of the house, to the point where in our Shastras it is recommended to not touch anyone as much as possible. Today we all call it social distancing, but it is recommended in the Vedas to not touch anyone unnecessarily because diseases can be communicated to you. With the evolution of time, it was misunderstood by many people, branded as discrimination. A fun fact is, no one needs to touch anyone else without any purpose. Why should one touch anyone else? There is absolutely no need to express emotions. There are other ways of expressing emotions, through words, through non-contact medium. When we unnecessarily make contact, the communication of diseases becomes much more easier. So this is the reason why most of our ancestors did not touch anyone. They did not have the habit of touching anyone. And whenever they went outside and came, they immediately took a bath in order to ensure that the disease does not spread among the members of his or her own house. So it is an arsenal of good life practices that we need to understand. The second point that we need to understand is that we need not wait for the recognition from the West to approve what we have been following. What happens every day? Once the West propagates and plagiarizes the practice, we immediately fall to saying, oh, we also used to follow the same. Our ancestors did it first. But it is important to understand that Indians do not have to wait for the approval from Western countries for a tradition to be followed. Yoga is very good for health. When it came back from the West, we accepted it much more than it was accepted before. And the most recent research in the West has said that a bi-monthly, that is, no, not a bi-monthly, in a month, two times in a month, a 24-hour fasting is recommended for eliminating the dead cells. This is what we have been following. Many of us might have been on fasting for Ekadashi, many of us have been on fasting for Pradosha or the Trayodashi Tithi. See, we must understand Ekadashi is a Tithi which comes two times in the same month. So in 1 month, 2 days, you are fasting for 24 hours from the previous day night to the next day night. That way, you are eliminating your body's dead cells. My point is, we need not wait for the West to recognize this practice and come back to us with a refined name. We can follow it as it is, and then we can research about it and learn more about it. There is a huge difference between superstition and tradition. None of the superstitions have been listed in the Vedas. In the Vedas, there is no reference as to you must stop when a black cat runs. That is a superstition. There is no Vedic reference for that. For the points we have Vedic reference, it is our duty as Indians to research it, spread it to everyone, and make sure that the West does not plagiariate it and bring it back to us and we look at it in awe and wonder. With that quote, let me start addressing the subject of capital punishment and what does the Vasishtha Smriti have to say in this topic. The Vasishtha Smriti has one single shloka to describe the 6 types of Atatayinaha. It classifies 6 types of people who deserve such kind of death penalty. So, the English translation for Atatayinaha is infidels, but it has been misused by many people, including our friends from the neighboring country. They have misused the word infidel and used it for very different purposes. But the origin of the word, the etymology of the word infidel means that someone who deserves death penalty, someone who is unfaithful and crime worthy. He has done a crime. So the shloka goes as Agnido Garadaschaiva Shastrapanir Dhanapaha Kshetradhara Apaharta cha Shadete Atatayinaha. 6 type of Atatayinaha: Agnidaha, Garadaha, Shastrapanihi, Dhanapaha, Kshetradhara, Apaharta. I will be explaining every type elaborately. First, Agnidaha means arsonator. In common language, a person who burns others' property. Meaning they want to destroy someone else's fortune completely without leaving them anything to survive on, without leaving them any trace for recovery. The arsonator in our law only undergoes a low priority punishment. The reason for this is that the investigation is very complex. Once you burn everything, there is no trace of who did it, who started it. It is very difficult to identify who started this or what the motive was. Thus, detecting the crime and finding the culprit is very complex, laborious and time consuming. But the Vasishtha Smriti says, when found appropriately guilty, such a person is justified for death penalty, as arson is a well-planned incident. You cannot suddenly start a massive fire accidentally. It happens in various cases in factories. That is a different case. We are talking about a person who starts a fire, who sets a building on fire. In US police terms, it is a first degree crime. They call it a first degree crime because it is highly well planned. Arson is highly well planned. So that person is eligible for death penalty. The second category of people are classified as the Garadaha, the poisoners. The term poisoner here is very metaphoric. Directly, it refers to someone who kills by poisoning, someone who adds poison and kills you. But the metaphoric aspect is one who is disguised as good but betrays behind the back. There is a common subhashita saying, Parokshe karyahantaram pratyakshe priyavadinam varjayet tadrasham mitram vishakumbham payomukham. There are some people who talk well in front of you. They praise you, they talk as though they are well-wishers, and when they go back, they do all sorts of things to ensure that you fail. When they behind your back, they commit all sorts of jealous and greedy mistakes in order to ensure you do not succeed. Such a kind of person should be avoided because he is like Vishakumbham Payomukham, a pot full of poison with milk on the top, disguised by milk on the top. The Garada, the poisoner, is very dangerous because poison in general is never consumed directly. It is often camouflaged with a good edible substance. Similarly, one who is disguised as a friend amongst all the good people and betrays is eligible for death penalty. The most famous example for this type of crime is probably the betrayal by Marcus Brutus in the most famous Shakespearean tragedy play, Julius Caesar. The third category of Atatayinaha is Shastrapanihi, one who attacks an unarmed person with a weapon. We must understand that the unarmed man with an armed weapon is very important because, as I will explain in the next few minutes, the intent for killing when your opponent is weaponless is very established. Even in Kshatriya Dharma, killing an unarmed man is not allowed, except when you are providing justice. Arjuna's killing of Karna is justified as it is providing justice for the death of Abhimanyu, where Abhimanyu was weaponless and was murdered by Karna and many other people present there who were all armed, while Abhimanyu was unarmed. But why is this emphasis on unarmed and armed is that one who attacks unarmed people with weapons deceitfully is completely motivated. The one with a weapon always has the upper hand and can choose whether or not to kill the victim. The one who chooses to kill definitely has no good intentions and is thus not suitable for being left alive. When defending an attack, the person being under attack, that is a different issue. But here, when an unarmed person is attacked by an armed person, it is completely motivated and the intent is very, very firm that the process that is going to happen is going to be killing. There is a choice. If it is an emergency case, the person can be left alone. He can be injured and left alone. But deciding to kill surely reflects upon the negative and dark intentions of the mind. The next aspect of these Atatayinaha is Dhanapaha. Dhanapaha is one who steals through violence. Very important to emphasize on violence here, because even in Indian civil law it is called dacoitry, not robbery. Robbery is stealing without violence and dacoitry is stealing with violence. Meanwhile, why this law is very specifically established is that one who steals for need will not choose the violent path. It may sound illogical to us, but psychiatrists of the past and Psychologists of the present have confirmed choice is always a privilege. If we can choose, if we have the ability and the chance to choose, we are privileged. Let us take an example in our everyday life. Need never seeks choice. Imagine we are exceedingly hungry, and when we reach home, we immediately ask if there is anything to eat. We do not ask for anything specific, as the need of that moment is to satisfy the stomach. Expectation of a particular eatable or expectation of a particular thing is a privilege and thus is not classified as a need. This dimension of need and greed keeps fluctuating in our life and takes various forms. But when we are desperate, we tend to attend to our needs, otherwise, we tend to attend to our greed. Even Mahatma Gandhi said, the world has enough for everyone's need and not for anyone's greed. The most famous example of bifurcation between need and greed can be the incident where Narendranath Datta, we all know who Narendranath Datta is, it was the Purvashrama name of Swami Vivekananda. Narendranath Datta had gone to meet Swami Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and he asked Swami Ramakrishna, when can I see God? Why am I not able to see God? And Swami Ramakrishna gave a very specific, crystal clear answer. He said, when you make your need to see God, you will be able to see God. When you have desperacy, when you make it a need, you will absolutely be able to see God. Till you have it as a greed, that is, let us see if I can see God, till then you cannot see God. It is like the sensation of our head being thrust down in a river. At that moment, our total need and intent is to somehow get our head out of the water. It is desperation. We struggle. At that moment, no other thought comes to our mind. If that kind of desperacy is there to see God, we will be able to see God. A great example of understanding the bifurcation between need and greed. Swami Ramakrishna is an inspiration for so many other acharyas who came after his lineage. So, we have understood that dacoitry for a specific object is greed taking a dimension where the crook part of the self is awoke. Various cases of need robbery have been reported. When we look at the cases of need robbery, we always see cases of stealing food, oil, essentials, whereas dacoitry ranges from stealing vehicles to committing scams. Thus, one with dacoitry intent is very clear of his greedy intentions and therefore does not deserve any mercy as per the Vasishta Smriti. The next type of crime is the Kshetradhara. Kshetradhara means land appropriation. Land appropriation is essentially greed taking a huge stature that the individual is willing to cause misery to the other person by snatching away his land. For almost all people, and especially farmers, their land is everything. The land on which they have a factory or their house or their farm is their only source of livelihood. By taking away one's land, the livelihood of the person is destroyed and so is the victim's life. So one who snatches others' land has a clear intent and deserves no mercy. The next category is the apaharta. We all know what an apaharta is. In common terms, apaharta is a person who lusts on someone else's wife or lusts without consent. Everyone would understand why this is wrong and everyone would agree that these criminals deserve death penalty. For these people again, the intent is very clear, and for one with no control over one's senses, death penalty is definitely a deservable punishment. If you have no self-control over your own hormonal activities, what will one achieve in life? if he or she is ready to place their hand on someone else without their consent, is it the lakshana of a good human being? Does such a human being deserve any mercy? The Vasishtha Samhita says such a person deserves no mercy. And these 6 types of criminals are called infidels, and they deserve death penalty. As I mentioned before, many people, especially in our neighboring countries, use the word infidel in a very wrong sense, and thus we must all make a pledge to properly use the word infidel for a criminal. Infidel does not mean what they have interpreted. The root of the word, the etymology of the word infidel is one who cannot be trusted, one who is unfaithful, and one who deserves death penalty. That is what an infidel is. Also, while we are at the pledge, let us all, as Bharatiyas, let us all pledge to fast 2 days a month, as much as possible. Take this pratigna, because now it has come from the West also for people who want inspiration to come from the West. Even the West has said fasting 2 days a month is very good for your body as it destroys dead cells. Let us make it a practice to either fast on Ekadashi or Trayodashi or the Kritika Nakshatra for Bhaktas of Lord Subramanya, or any particular nakshatra or tithi that will account for 2 days in a month, and let us make it a practice such that we respect our own traditions and we do not wait for more inspiration to come from the West to teach us how to live. We have a perfect interpretation of life in the Sanatana Dharma. They have taught us how to live. If we still wait for the inspiration to come from the West, it only means how foolish we are. So let us not wait for inspiration to come from the West. Let us follow our own practices. Let us not brand them traditions. They are actually good lifestyles. Let us become healthier individuals, good individuals, and let us carry our country forward and make it more prestigious. With that note, I conclude my lecture today. गोविन्देति सदा ध्यानं गोविन्देति सदा जपं गोविन्देति सदा ध्यानं सदा गोविन्दकीर्तनम् स्वस्तिः प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्तां न्यायेन मार्गेण महीं महिषाः गोब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यं लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु काले वर्षतु पर्जन्यः पृथिवी सस्यशालिनी देशोऽयं क्षोभरहितः सज्जनाः सन्तु निर्भयाः अपुत्राः पुत्रिणः सन्तु पौत्रिणः अधनाः सधनाः सन्तु जीवन्तु शरदां शतम् श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम्।